Sri Lanka banking sector is not behind India. If you really compare the banking developments that had happened, and how the banking transactions are taken place from clearing to direct payment settlements and all that, if you really look at, we are, I think, better than Indian financial sector.
We can't wait till the entire government gets digitized from end to end.
Right.
So what we have looked at is there are enough technologies out there. We have deployed so many technologies.
Sure.
What we looked at was, can we bring in those technologies into the existing infrastructure?
The smartphone, going back to your original question, has been a game changer for us because it allowed us to take the products to literally the fingertips of our citizens and the businesses.
Smartphones are everywhere, and people expect to do a lot more with this device than to update their social media status. What does this device mean for Sri Lanka's payments infrastructure and digitization ambitions? In the studio with us are the leadership team of LankaPay, an organization that is the middle layer between consumers and digital financial services. Here with us is the chairman of the board of LankaPay, Lakshman Silva, LankaPay's chief executive, Channa de Silva, and deputy chief executive, Dinuka Perera. I welcome all of you to Echelon. Lakshman, let's start with you and here. A lot has changed in the last decade, particularly now young people expect to do everything on a smartphone, right? For an organization such as LankaPay, what does this mean? Because, let's talk about what LankaPay does in the wider economy as we go along. But you have, as an organization, you have your tentacles in all aspects of digitalization, right? What does the prevalence of smartphones and the expectations of people mean for you?
I think it means a lot for us. Traditionally, it's LankaPay, when you say that, people might think it's an older organization which deals with only businesses and enterprises and nothing beyond that kind of a situation. But with the last 2-3 years developments that had taken place after the COVID, there have been a lot of digitalization happening. LankaPay itself had got transformed into a digital environment, I think. It was originally a payment settlement system only. Now we are very much into digital. So I think it means a lot. And it enables us to actually engage the younger generation more with LankaPay activities. Now new products and services that we are introduced into the market will help people to get engaged with us. I think, so in that sense, together with the banking community and the financial sector, it will enable us to get more and more younger generation involved with this, and also to get mobile-centered banking transactions, business operations, payment settlement systems, everything to happen on that basis. So it's a good start for us as well.
Right. Channa, let me bring you in. I'm particularly interested in what's happened over the last few years, right? Let's not go back 20 years when you had your beginnings in check clearing. And you've overseen the change that happened in the last few years. Tell us, contrast for us, what that change means.
Yeah, I think let's first look at what we are trying to do.
Okay.
Because we are trying to move into digital.
Right.
Actually, from a cash-rich economy. And what is the best way to do that? So that's where we looked at what should be the channel that we should go to the market. Then we saw the smartphone coming in, which is about, now what we find is about 70% of the household has a smartphone thanks to COVID, e-learning and other things. So what we are trying to provide is move away from cash. So which means we need to provide them a medium in their hands, which is the smartphone. So I think that is where we came closer to the person in terms of doing a transaction from wherever they are. The second one is actually the younger generation, they are born with smartphones, right? And they live with smartphones. So I think if we can provide the service, rather than taking people away to a different location to provide a service, can we bring the service to them? I think that is where the change that happened, right? So we are actually bringing the service to you, to your fingertips, wherever you are. I think that's the difference. So that's difference in adoption. Because when you are taking people away into provide a service, the adoption drops down. But if you are providing the service to wherever they are, whatever the time, the material of the location, then they will start seeing the convenience and the adoption.
Can you clarify that? Taking people away from basically from where they are trying to perform the transaction.
Yeah.
Actually, for example, if you want to make a payment to a government department, you have to go and visit there physically,
Sure.
and wait in a line.
Sure.
But here, when you are at home,
Yeah.
even midnight, you can make a payment to a municipal council
Sure.
from home.
Sure.
Then it's bringing the service to you to do it, because, for example, you may not have time during the day, after office hours.
Sure.
You are at home relaxing,
Sure.
you can still make the payment.
Sure.
So you are bringing the service to the consumer
Sure.
at any time of the day, wherever they are. I think that is where the convenience
Right. And I think I'll bring you in here also, Lakshman. I think what is LankaPay's role as the organization is now known, right? Is it going to be the last mile? Is it going to be the first mile? Are you in the middle? What sort of an organization is it?
Structurally, LankaPay was introduced by the government of Sri Lanka. We have to admit the fact that it's owned by central bank, the balance by the banking community. So there is a regulation bound, there is a structure that is being built around LankaPay. So we need to work within the framework of given task
Sure.
and the responsibilities. We can't do like a private sector, exclusive private sector, non-control organization. We won't be able to do things like that.
Sure.
So there is always a oversight by the central bank of what we are doing right at the moment, while facilitating the government journey for digitalization. So government has a different kind of a plan, agenda through the ICT and various other institutions to digitalize the economy. That's the plan, and which started about 2-3 years ago, and now it's been carried on. We also have a separate primary objectives and plans developed for the next 3-4 years into the financial sector. So our role in two folds. One is helping the government central bank's agenda for financial inclusivity, bringing people into the normal financial sector, do transactions, creating somewhat a cashless society, not 100% digitalization part of it. And the second responsibility of LankaPay to facilitate the government agenda of digitalization process.
I'll bring the two of you in. So does that mean LankaPay is building a middle layer of technology in a way?
Yeah. So I think if you look at the services that we provide, we don't necessarily provide any service to the end consumer directly.
Right, exactly.
So we are sort of providing the services behind. So always the front end could be a bank or a fintech app.
Sure.
Right? The consumer is only seeing that. They are not really seeing LankaPay. But our role has evolved. Rather than just providing a back-end solution, we are filling the gaps also. Now, through technology, when you want to provide a seamless experience to end user, there will be certain gaps in providing that service to make it end-to-end seamless. So we are actually filling those gaps by providing services, so which actually makes the fintech apps and the banks apps more seamless.
Sure.
So our role is actually making it more seamless, providing the back-end solutions, but also ensure that the consumers are getting that convenience to consume that service. Because what we are trying to actually do is to change a behavior. Because moving away from cash, which everybody is used to, is a behavioral change. In order to make that behavioral change, there had to be either two. One is either you need to have a use case where the consumers actually wanting to do that, right? Where we are actually solving a problem in the market. If you do that, then the people will consume. The other aspect is, you need to bring in a service which was not there previously, and consume that. So either way, we need to provide something new to the customers and which solves a problem. So that's what we are doing. We are solving problems for customers using digital, especially in the payments arena, and by doing so, we are hopefully increasing adoption.
So this is not one product, right, Dinuka, that LankaPay is behind. While Channa makes the problem sound quite simple, right? Make it solve a problem for the consumer, and you have to have a product that kind of does that. But for you, and in the background, it's not just one simple machine that does all this.
So just to add to what now Chairman said, smartphone, going back to your original question, has been a game changer for us. because it allowed us to take the products to literally the fingertips of our citizens and the businesses. So if you look at the products that we have launched in the recent past, all are kind of smartphone friendly mobile specific products. Just Pay was a game changer again because it allowed people to download a mobile app and register their accounts, whichever the bank their accounts are. And on top of that, we have built a number of other products as well. And even the recent products like PayMe or Payment Exchange Name, all those are smartphone friendly. So how we have done this is to look at how we enable the financial inclusivity, promoting digital payments through mostly the smartphone. So you are right in saying the smartphone has been a catalyst for us to take our products to the masses through our financial institutions.
Lakshman, coming back to you, the government has a stated objective of accelerating digitalization. I mean, it looks like Sri Lanka is a bit of a laggard considering what India has achieved in the last few years, if not, right? Where does LankaPay fit into this picture of accelerated digitalization? It's not just payments the government is talking about. How does LankaPay fit in?
Actually, if I just to add to your comment, Sri Lanka banking sector is not behind India. If you really compare the banking developments that had happened and how the banking transactions are taken place from clearing to direct payment settlements and all that, if you really look at, we are, I think, better than Indian financial
perhaps
sector.
in risk-based regulation also.
But when you answering your question, the government strategy has to align with the Sri Lankan economic development plan. So I think part of the economic development is to bring the digitalization into forefront. If you really look at the government sector, we are very, very backward actually. The problems that the government sector is facing in digitalization, investments that they have made in the past is not sufficient for them to carry on. Because we have believed in Sri Lanka that the government can play the role providing services only through humans. They have never thought of machine provided solutions to be given. If you really take an example, even a local government authority, we are usually getting the notices of assessment. We have to go and stay in a queue. Then we have to make cash payment. They are not willing to take anything else. Even a check payment is not acceptable by them. So these kind of developments only by just regulations or standards, I don't think can be done. There is a long process for Sri Lanka. Even the digitalization introduction will require human thinking change, patterns of recruitment. These are things government of Sri Lanka is planning to bring. Government of Sri Lanka planning to bring in a lot of young IT graduates to. I can remember in the last budget they were talking about recruiting 50,000 IT graduates in developing the Sri Lankan government's digital payment platforms. What does that mean? Because they admit the fact government institutions does not have the capable backbone IT knowledge people. So I think LankaPay's role in this is, if you really look at the recently introduced GovPay. Now GovPay will not be successful unless the government institutions embrace that 100%.
Sure.
People can make payments, but if the credit is not received by them on the same day or T+1, they will not have confidence over the system. So I think, although when you look back, we have worked with a set of institutions like financial sector, where they are ready always to embrace whatever we introduce with a little bit of facilitation. But the government entities, we are now responsible to look at how they operate, give backbone support to them until and such time the government is ready to roll out completely on themselves.
Sure. So this means that you have to do several things. It looks like, Channa, there is an element of trust. There is an element of interoperability. There is a cultural change that is necessary. And this transcends technology. It's not about technology. It's about other factors that also matter.
We need to solve problems fast. We can't wait till the entire government gets digitized from end to end.
Right.
So what we have looked at is there are enough technologies out there. We have deployed so many technologies.
Sure.
What we looked at was, can we bring in those technologies into the existing infrastructure.
Sure.
Government departments don't have systems. They don't have people.
Sure.
But can we provide that service with whatever we have with the same restrictions that the government departments may have? So that's where
Right.
GovPay came in.
Sure.
So GovPay came in a sense where more than 90% of the government departments don't have any system. They just have a PC, prints an invoice and post-its, right? So can we bring that into digital payment? In a normal sense, you can't. But then we thought through that and said, what is the problem we are trying to solve? You already get an invoice, physical invoice at your home. Can we give them an option to just make a payment from home rather than visit in the municipal council? So that's so you take the physical invoice, you log into your internet banking, you have a form, you just enter some information, make the payment, money goes into the government department's account, and you get a confirmation, digital electronic confirmation. And then we provide an interface to the government department to log in and see what payments they have received.
Right.
And they do a bank reconciliation and say, confirm, customer gets a SMS saying the payment is received by the department. Very simple solution using existing technology rather than trying to boil the ocean.
Right.
So we have enough of such, for example, the police traffic fine. The classic case. 2 decades, people tried to implement a solution by giving smartphones to police and all that. What we said is, we have a solution where a customer, if he or she has a smartphone, can use either his internet banking, mobile banking, fintech app to make a payment right now. So why can't the customer, when he or she gets stopped for a fine, why can't he or she make that payment instantaneously from there using whatever they have rather than trying to introduce apps and new devices, right? So it's very simple. They have an app, they have internet banking. Once they get the traffic fine sheet, they just enter some information, make the payment. The policeman immediately gets a SMS to his mobile saying the payment is received, gives a license, comes home. So it takes away the problem of going and visiting a post office, then taking that receipt, and the post offices are closed during weekends, after office hours. So it addresses the problem using the current technology we have without having to invest in government developing. I'm not saying it should not be developed, but it's going to take 5-10 years to get there.
What's the reception been like to these efforts, Dinuka? I mean, there's always that fear of the unknown, particularly if you're a government servant or part of this ecosystem. You'd be wondering, what's
it has been tremendous. I mean, we have been very encouraged by the reception we have received from the government organizations. Back in the day, we have to go behind government organizations to get them on board to online payments. But now, actually, government organizations are coming behind us to onboard them. So from the government side also, we have seen kind of a mindset change. They want to facilitate online payments, and a lot of these government organizations see the benefit of online payments, because for them also they can create efficiencies within their organization by adopting government payments. So we have nearly 50 government organizations on GovPay, but very soon, before the end of the year, we are expecting it to be over 100. So from the government side, there has been a tremendous response for GovPay.
Actually, it's actually even more than the payments, because payment is only a part of a whole cycle, right? Because it starts with an invoice, a purchase order, or some sort of a physical document trail, right? So why can't you make that digital? So that is where we have actually introduced digital signature, right? So you don't necessarily need to receive a physical invoice that can be digitally signed and sent. So that is where we are deploying digital signatures to make the entire cycle digital. Because what happens is, so we solved a problem for the country. The customs was open 24/7, 365 days a year. But the payment to be made was, you had to go to a state bank before 3 o'clock on a weekday and make that payment to get some goods cleared. But we changed it by introducing digital payments so that you can do a payment midnight on a Sunday night. But then it doesn't solve the problem of people having to upload physical documents or take a file with the documents, proof of documents there. So we solved that problem. Now from their office, they can scan the document, digitally sign and upload to Asikuda or any government system. So then it solves the problem end to end, because if you don't solve that, the efficiency doesn't go up. So the only problem is, if just by solving customs problem, because the document has to go to 5-6 other departments. So we have to get all of them in that cycle into the same digital platform to actually make it the efficiency better. So that's where everything has to come together.
As LankaPay, you seem to be tackling this in various angles, right? You can't just tackle it in one dimension. If you look at the priorities that you have, what do you think are the key ones to get right in the next 2 to 3 years for LankaPay to facilitate this, vision of a digitalized Sri Lanka?
Yeah, so I think it's very simple. We had to get a majority of the government departments to accept digital.
Right.
From a legal perspective, there's no issue because there's been Electronic Transaction Act since 2006, which provides legal validity to electronic communication, whether it's a payment or any other. So I think one is if you can get all these payments digitized, then that actually takes away some of the malpractices like corruption and other things because it leaves a transaction trail. So that actually addresses a problem that has been there. The second one is for people to consume that service without wasting their time, without going to a department, without waiting in lines, and do it from wherever they are, whether it's from office or home, right? Then that solves another problem, right? So congestion, government having to deploy a lot of people manually, all that goes away. So I think those would be two fronts. It's not only addressing the payments, but also we have to address the digital communication channels, whether it's electronic documents or whatever. So if you bring those two together, then the efficiency of the government will go up. And for me, to do that, you don't need rocket science. You don't need mega systems. You already have technology. If you just tweak some of the regulations and government departments, acceptance of this. So that's the regulation. Then the policy level the government must bring in, whether it has to be mandated by having electronic. When you do that, then people will start accepting mandatorily. So I think that's the tweak that we need for this to push through.
To add to Channa's question, now we are only concentrating only on the government base.
Right.
But I think we also have another mandate with regard to the Sri Lankan general consumer market. And now lots of people in Sri Lanka, consumers and the merchants, do like to do transactions using cash. And it had taken a little turn once the credit cards were introduced. But I think the QR that was introduced by in collaboration with Central Bank of Sri Lanka is something that we need to adapt quickly and fast. Even that also there had been, reluctance from the merchant side, reluctance from the consumer side. So confidence level had to be built up. So I think the banks also had been very slow to adapt to this QR system, and we have a mandate to promote and propagate the QR systems in Sri Lanka, which will help. Now, when you really look at Sri Lankan adoption to QR is very poor. When you see what we have negotiated and associated, like Indian market, Indian tourists that who are coming to Sri Lanka, how they use QR effectively. Chinese tourists who are coming to Sri Lanka, we are now facilitating through WeChat and other the forms of payment modules.
So this is already happening. Indian tourists here are using QR code.
Yeah, Union Pay is something that Channa.
Alipay Plus. So Alipay Plus has 36 wallets connected in the region. So any of those customers who come to Sri Lanka can scan Lanka QR and pay. So what we saw was I think coming from Chairman's notion that our consumers have been slow to adopt. But what we saw was the tourists, which is sort of hopefully boom in the near future, they are used to that in those countries.
Sure.
So if you provide that, then our consumers will also see, hey, people are actually using QR. Because what actually happens is nobody will use it in the future as well.
Sure.
But when they see the tourists, the Chinese, the Indians coming and using it, merchants will see a benefit because they are having increased business. But the consumers will also see, hey, this is something that works. I mean, if an app from India or app from China can actually scan this, why can't app from Sri Lanka?
Sure.
So I think these are some of the future plans that we are having, and that those are our responsibilities to ensure as a payment and settlement organization. We need to quickly see how can we promote the QR. So I think we are having a very constant dialogue with the financial sector. Central Bank is also involved in it, and there are many initiatives. So that also will help there are, even if you really look at the Sri Lankan merchants, they also sometimes they lose a lot of money through the networks and all that. So they will have the ability to manage the finances very well. And also government revenue point of view also. I mean, not that we are saying that everything get translated into taxes and all that, but there is a equal playing ground for everybody in Sri Lanka. there won't be any issues. But then the government also has a responsibility in that sense to look after the merchants, people who are recording transactions accurately, who are submitting returns properly. Our tax structures also had to encourage people to make, the very transparent systems in Sri Lanka, recording systems in Sri Lanka, because why Sri Lankan merchants are reluctant to accept, anything in form of digital. My strong feeling is that because of the tax fear. So if the regulations in Sri Lanka is such that you encourage people, have lower tax brackets for people for pay taxes, and then everybody will get encouraged to do that.
Let me bring you, I asked Channa about what LankaPay's strategic priorities are.
Yes.
Now, if I flip that question slightly to you, Lakshman, this way, and that is, from a compliance, regulatory, or legal point of view, what do you think are the strategic imperatives or priorities that LankaPay faces today that you have to solve at that board level, at interaction with bureaucrats and others who are making the decisions here?
First of all, we need to keep the confidence level very high. Sri Lanka, LankaPay's, of course, operating systems have been always 100% operating overnight. There hadn't been any faults. So as a board, we want to make sure all our systems are, current, up to date, with all securities required for the running of the systems. And we want to make sure the system is always operating 100% in operating level. Then we need to also not only the banking community, because banking people are well aware about the operations of LankaPay, but with the recent events that are happening in the financial market, we also have a responsibility to protect the banking systems, transactions from any of these malpractices that are happening outside. That is sometimes beyond our control, but of course, under us, we have a organization which is being promoted by Central Bank of Sri Lanka called FinCSET, who are always looking at the security aspects of various institutions. So we are trying now, we are in the process of formalizing the FinCSET organization to be a regulatory body, and to make sure it is being regulated also under the supervision of LankaPay, regulated by the central bank.
Just to understand, this organization will be a regulator for the overall payments,
not payment system, but the security infrastructure
underlying the payment system.
Payment systems, right? Payment systems responsibility is LankaPay, but our FinCSET's main objective is to ensure all the any kind of intruders who are making coming to the financial markets, and if there are any scams that are happening in the market, to highlight that to the banking sector and to ensure banking system are not affected.
Does this require a new law amendment to
No, I mean, we are in the process of discussing with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. I don't think there are laws required, but it's a matter of how we incorporate the institution, get the things rolling over. Okay. So I believe that towards the end of the year, we can have that kind of formalization.
Now, if you look at the overall ecosystem, Lakshman, do you feel there are regulations or new laws that are required to help you sort of take this vision forward effectively?
No, I think KYC per se, KYC, know your customer, know your customer thing is being looked after by the banks in Sri Lanka. So we do not have anything relating to that. But there are some laws that was required are now coming up, Data Protection Act.
Sure.
And also that's actually gives a lot of strength to not only to LankaPay but everybody else. There is a lot of discussions going on. Still, it is not been mandated. But in terms of LankaPay, institution that had evolved over a longer period of time, we are now bringing in a lot of compliance-related matters, internal control systems, corporate governance regulations. Because although it is owned by the banks and financial institutions, we are trying to benchmark LankaPay to a listed company. Listed companies had got evolved over the last 2-3 years with many new regulations coming in on board. Although we don't have the requirement of independent directors, number of directors and so forth, but internal corporate governance practices we are adapting very fast. I think this year we have done that. We have set up subcommittees what are required by the Securities Exchange Commission, although we are not regulated institutions.
So expanding from that, actually what we are trying to do now, especially if you look at the financial transactions, the consumer adoption will depend on the trust,
Sure.
right? So if there are a lot of frauds and other malpractices, then the consumers will not shift to digital. They'll stay back in cash. So in order to make sure that people's trust is preserved, we need to make sure that the systems are reliable, secure, and no malpractices happen. So that is where our role for financial sector stability, we must bring in reactive and proactive. Primarily proactive transactions, so that these things are minimized and we have people's confidence in moving into digital and continuing to do so, right? Otherwise people will move back to cash because if they feel it's safer. So in order to do that, it's our role to make sure that the systems are stable, systems are reliable, and also systems are secure. So that's also part and parcel of our role if we want everybody to move into digital.
Sure. And Dinuka, when we think of LankaPay in the context of what Channa is saying, right, sometimes we may think of it as a kind of a organization that's an interface between, it's a middleware kind of organization, right? Means there's a lot of layers of technology, right? Who's responsible for these layers of technology? Who has to make sure they're compliant? Who makes sure they're secure? Who makes sure that they adhere to the best data protection practices? Is that a role also of LankaPay, or is that a shared role?
So it's specifically a role for LankaPay. We have a very capable set of employees, and what we do is to try to benchmark our systems against the world's best. For example, we were the first company in Sri Lanka to get the PCI DSS standard. So that benchmark, that any information that flows through us in terms of card-related information is secured. So these systems are mostly, we get it from third-party solution providers, but we maintain the systems. So we have data centers, we have redundancy. Now security, what you mentioned, is a very significant problem right now. There are lots of issues which are coming up, but we make sure that our systems are thoroughly secure and that no intrusion can happen. So this is a 24/7, 365 exercise, but we have kept our systems very secure so that we can't let people lose confidence in our systems.
Should there be a breach for instance, a financial institution, only that financial institution's data is at stake, but here data of all financial institutions, potentially now including government pass through.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's more than the data. It's the trust, the confidence that people have whether their data is safe. Because end of the day, if their data is compromised, their privacy and everything else is compromised, right? Sure. So I think that is where we need to make sure that not only LankaPay, even the banks must ensure that their data is safe. Because otherwise, the whole, again, the trust factor, breaks down.
And when you mentioned the consumer use case, I mean, that's the litmus test virtually for you, that consumers are actually using this, right? Channa, look at what the data is telling you about consumer adoption over the last few years. Can you share some data points with us? And is adoption increasing at a appreciable rate?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people tend to say that Sri Lanka is behind. But
okay. I said so myself.
I beg to differ, especially in the financial sector, when you look at the volume and value of transaction using digital. So across all our systems, last calendar year, we recorded 34 trillion rupees worth of transactions, which is more than the GDP of Sri Lanka. And we recorded more than 17 trillion rupees worth of real-time instant payments last year, which is more than 50% of GDP of Sri Lanka. So there is adoption, but the adoption is primarily towards more corporate and more urban setting.
Sure.
So the adoption is the problem with the rural and retail, SME payments to other peer-to-peer payments, kind of a infrastructure, right? So that is what we are lagging. That is what we need to address as the next
value is there, the volume is what you want.
Absolutely. So the volume will come from retail.
Right.
So retail, it's not only a payment problem. It's I think Chairman alluded to that. Like it could be a fear of taxes to so many other things. Now so we need to look at what other countries have done. Maybe adopt some of those. So for example, some of the countries, they have been progressive. They have given tax breaks for digital payment, not breaks, maybe lower taxes as opposed to cash. So that is one. India did something. Next step, they took away the cash, which had a catalyst. But the problem is that was very unpopular in the market. But you don't necessarily need to take away the cash. One is you have to provide because a benefit to especially the SME sector. Because that's like running 52% of our GDP. And if you don't get them onto digital, 50% of our transaction will not move. So in order to get them, one is obviously digital channels need to be able to, I think QR is a classic case because it's zero cost to the merchant. Zero cost to the merchant to implement QR. It's just a sticker, right? Whereas if you have to have a terminal, it costs about 100,000 or more. Most of the SMEs will not be able to afford. So you need to provide lower cost or zero cost instruments to merchants to accept a payment. And obviously, the channel for consumers would be smartphone. So since we have both in place, how do we get merchants on board? And how do we get merchants to accept even after they come on board? And how do we get consumers good enough use cases to make that transactions? So if you can bring all these three together, then it will succeed. So in that sense, government has a role. One is, obviously, if they can, bring in progressive tax reforms, encouraging people to go digital on one side, and maybe for consumers, right, provide them a lower cost option to make that.
As chairman of the board, Lakshman, if you were to wish for a catalyst that can speed things up, right? And then you looked at the examples of others in the region who have done this successfully. What can those catalytic kind of events be that will kind of propel digitalization and digital payments?
I think there was a time where in Sri Lanka, introduction of technology was considered as an important aspect. Incentives and concessions were provided. I think even Sri Lanka, the tech companies are there, the people are there. They are also coming up with various kind of digital payment structures, platforms and all that. But now my strong belief is that some authority has to take control over the whole thing. We are only implementers. We are not regulators. So we need to, I think central bank is very seriously looking at it, bringing in all digital payment platforms, digital other structures which are required for consumer usage into one particular domain, and then only that you can do it. So I think LankaPay as an organization is ready to implement all these initiatives under a framework. And as Channa and Dinuka mentioned, that we are geared with all the kind of security compliance, all that aspects, and we have the practice of adapting such things. So if you're answering your question, regulatory environment has to facilitate this kind of digital formation. Tax organizations has to look at separately, and adoption of government organizations to digital platforms. That is an important aspect. I think the revenue collections now, if you really look at, customs is one clear example where 90% of their transactions are now made through the online real-time payment systems. And one of the key examples, success stories last year was the Department of Inland Revenue. When the Department of Inland Revenue took a bold decision not to accept cash payments for taxes, 99% of the people has to make online payments. So they did that. So there are other streams of revenue generating organizations in Sri Lanka which can actually transform into a digital payment platforms. If they do so, the majority of the people will actually come on board. So I think there is a digital ministry, but what I see is decisions are being made in various forums, various places. It's time for us to get a concentrated effort and one agenda, one plan for Sri Lanka and develop that. And we are there to support that.
As a leadership team, Channa, what do you think is LankaPay's biggest contribution to Sri Lanka's digital future? And if you look at the last few years, what do you think is that outstanding thing?
I think as of now, it's just pay.
Right.
What we did with JustPay was we leveled the level playing field. We leveled the playing field, because what actually happened was previously a consumer had to use his or her own banks, whatever instrument that they provided, whether it's internet banking, mobile banking, or app by the same bank. They had no choice, right? Whether they liked it or not, they had no choice. But what we did was we democratized that, where a customer can now use any app in the market, whether it's his or her own bank's app or internet banking or a third-party app. So in that sense, it provides a choice to the consumer to use whatever preferred channel that he or she uses to make a payment. So in that sense, now we see the fintechs are now coming into the ecosystem, because if you look at financial inclusivity going to that grassroots level, the underserved community, banks are very, very good at addressing a bigger portion of the segment. But when you go to the grassroots level, traditionally it has been microfinance and finance companies who have been addressing that, but it's mainly been manual. But now we see when fintechs come, even the telcos coming in, right? They will go to the grassroots level, provide that service, but back end there is a bank which is basically facilitating the transaction. So it's a marriage. It's a partnership. It's a collaboration, because you can't boil the ocean by one first party, right? Sure. It's a collaboration. So what we have done is we have brought all the players together through technology to collaborate and work together.
And just to be clear, JustPay itself is not an app or something like that, right? It's a middle layer.
Yeah, it's basically an instrument where a customer can just take his bank account and attach it to an app and make a payment, right? Sure. So it's a sort of a mode, right?
And customer will never come across JustPay.
Customer wouldn't know what JustPay is. Exactly. It's just adding your bank account is the option that they get, right? But into an app. Right, and into an app that they trust, into an app that they find convenient, and they will start using. Because the misnomer is, right, if you are just tied to one, if you don't like it, you will just shift back to cash, right? Here, if they start liking, for example, classic case is, we have this app called Helakuru previously, which actually provided the Sinhala keyboard, right? It has actually 4 million active users, 15 million downloads. So if you can convert that 4 million active users into digital payments, so now they have introduced LankaPay through Helakuru app, right? And moving 4 million users into digital, it will be very difficult for a bank to do that, overnight, right? Because we know that we have bank, consumers adopted internet banking, mobile banking, but moving 4 million is an opportunity that already has to move there.
So for a fintech who wants to kind of move their customers into the ecosystem this way, they don't have to think about building all the security, all the infrastructure themselves, right? The kind of the entry barrier is much lower.
Absolutely.
Because of JustPay.
Absolutely. And also, they don't also need to abide by the central bank's strict regulation that are put forward to banks. Right. Banks are liable for the transaction as far as the regulator is concerned, and they work with a bank who is already regulated and into the system.
Banks are liable because banks have to ensure the know your customer regulations are complied with.
Yeah. So what we have done is we have basically created a channel for everybody to come in.
Sure.
Immaterial of their size. It can. One of the most successful apps in the market is a 3-man shop, husband, wife, and actually 4-man shop, 2 developers. And they have millions of customers serving, using digital, which is called Paymaster, right? And their USP was one-touch mobile reload, right? And if a 4-man company can, attract 1 million customers, why not? So I think that's the opportunity that we have created in the market.
And what's can you give us some data points on JustPay? I mean, this is one of your big wins, as Channa pointed out. On the platform, what's usage like? What's transaction volumes like broadly?
It has grown exponentially. Like every day we see thousands of downloads of customers registering for JustPay, and a lot of banks have come on board. So irrespective of the bank that you can download the most preferred app that you have, maybe because it's easier to use, you are familiar with it, and register your accounts and start making payments. Now it has been one of the fastest growing products of what we have offered. And a lot of customers we see now downloading apps to register their bank accounts instead of going with their own banking apps.
So if you take the numbers a bit, right, we have more than 100,000 registrations a month, every month, right? And also we see, more than 2.5 to 3 million transactions are happening in this system, and also 15 to 20 billion rupees worth of transactions happening. These are small ticket, right? Mind you, about 50% of these transactions are below 1,000 rupees.
Right.
Small ticket items. So which is part of retail, right? Or maybe person to person transfers, right? But it's actually happening. Now this is providing a channel. So any app that is enabled through JustPay now you can pay police traffic fines. So that's the power of this whole ecosystem.
And from where you are, if you had this is kind of a little repetitive of the conversation, but I think I'm trying to bring it all together, right? And I'll start with you, then go to in fact I'll start with Lakshman. From where you are, Lakshman, I think what do you think from a board and governance level, and let's leave the rest for Channa and Dinuka to tackle. What are the big 2 or 3 things that you want to achieve that can only be done at that board level?
So one thing is the main important thing that I have been talking to the management team with regard to the reputation. The reputation, unparalleled reputation that we have made it over the last several decades, we need to maintain. And at a time where, financial scam is on the horizon, people are doing lots of other things. So I think we need to have that capability, confidence level built up, and we always put our efforts and concentration to the reputational related matter. That is one. Second aspect of it is that expansion. And think LankaPay, after long years of journey, we have made a record profit of about ₹1 billion this year. But mind you, it's not our full intention is not profits, but we need to build cash for the future expansions. Because if you really look at the capital investment that we are looking at in the next 3 years horizon, we are looking at about 3.5 billion to be invested in infrastructure development, upgrades, security, all that is required.
Mostly tech investments.
Tech investments, mostly tech investments. So we need to look at that side. So one is the tech side. The other side is...
So I'm curious, how does one go about financing a 3.5 billion?
So we need to get retention, Right. While we satisfy our shareholders by paying dividends and all that, we need to also always, as a board, we look at commercial viability of any product, because we can't be running like any other charity organization, because all these initiatives that we are starting needs always continuity, upgrades, new technology to be adapted to the organization.
So what's your capex run rate like?
So roughly it's about ₹1.5 billion a year.
Wow.
So so over a period of 3 years, we need to get to about 3.5 billion. So whilst we look at the machine sides, we need to also look at the human side, because we are having only a lean staff of about 130 to 140 people, but out of that 80 are top IT guys in the company. And in a situation where there is a brain drain, people leaving country and all that kind of a thing, and big demand for IT sector professionals, we need to retain all those staff. So we need, as a board, our all full attention is towards how to retain staff in our organization. And we are happy actually over the last 2-3 years. Our staff turnover has been low, retention have been high. And so we need to also make sure that they are comfortable, they are working well. They also get competitive remuneration and other packages. That's also have been looked at. And finally, there are 2 aspects on to final thing. One is the shareholder expectation that we are owned by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, by the banks of Sri Lanka. So we need to meet their requirements also very promptly, regularly, and ensure that their services are uninterrupted, and also provide their services at an affordable price. Because what happens is we can make charges from them, but then if the charges are getting translated into the consumer, end of the transaction volumes are going down. So we need to, while keeping in mind that we also be a commercial enterprise, we also have to make sure that we are not overburdening the banks by the end of it to the consumer. So all these are very important things, and I think corporate governance point of view, I'm happy that we got a set of good board of directors, including the central bank representation. I myself is nominated by the governor. So we all are actually responsible to ensure a good corporate culture organization is developed.
Dinuka, if I can bring you in from a sort of operational and security and technology point of view, what are those few things that you think LankaPay needs to get right?
So in terms of keeping our systems up all the time, because as you know, we are in the middle of the banks. So all the interbank transactions are facilitated through us.
Sure.
We embarking on international expansion where international players now have come, like from India, China, we have international integrations. So when those tourists who are coming from countries like India and China come in and scan in the QRs here, our systems should be working. So first and foremost, and that's one of our corporate goals year on year, to make sure our systems uptime are 100%. So that has been one of the most crucial elements that LankaPay has to look at, because our systems cannot go down. Even when we have certain disaster recovery drills, we tend to kind of switch over at 2 in the morning because to have the least amount of impact on the transactions. So that's one part of it. And also, like what our chairman alluded to, making sure our key staff, the capable staff that we have had for a number of years, are well looked after. Because through them only we can manage these systems. I mean, technology is there, but at the end of the day, it's the human hands that manage these systems. So taking care of our staff is also one of the key aspects.
Channa, let me bring you on the vision. From where you are as the leader of the team here and a big owner of the vision, what would success for LankaPay look like in the next few years? What are those things that you must get right, you think, to reach that vision?
Yeah, I think the probably the short to medium goal is if we can bring 30% of cash transaction into digital.
Right.
Which is
the number
which is
like?
right now the cash in circulation is about 1.3 trillion rupees. Right. I mean, it's not a surprise because even in India, digital has gone through the roof, but the cash transactions have grown because of the growth of the GDP, which is going to happen. So it'll be very unlikely that it'll be a cashless, but it'll be a less cash. So if you can hit to 30%, in the short to medium, I think we are there. Right, because that's the most difficult part.
In a percentage, what is it like right now, you think?
Right now, it's probably less than 10%.
Okay.
If you take the total volume of transactions, right? Because obviously there's cash in 1.3 trillion outside. So I think again coming back to this adoption, right? So there is a misnomer among certain groups saying that it has to be free, right? I mean, so while disagreeing with that, I mean, it has to be lower cost, but it can never be free because, for example, a consumer to consumer service, there's a cost to maintain that service, right? And if you don't provide world-class service, people will not use it. So as long as it's reasonable cost, people will use it provided it addresses the problem, provided them convenience, right? I mean, consider the minimum bus fare is 28 rupees one way. So up and down 56 rupees. So if you can do it from home for 20 rupees or 25 rupees, it's still cheaper than going in a bus and doing that service and wasting your time. So I think consumers will consume the service provided the service addresses the problem and provided them the convenience. So it doesn't have to be free. I think that's a complete misconception because if you have to provide a service fee, somebody has to subsidize, which is what the country went through, providing subsidies and, we are in this mess, right? So I think a reasonable cost service, people will consume provided it provide the service whenever they want it, reliable, secure, and all, and trust-based, right? So I think that is where a lot of, so I mean, you don't get the electricity free, you don't get the water free, you don't get data free, right? So why only transactions free, which doesn't add up. So I think that is where we must provide a service at a lower cost, but at a world-class level, then people will adapt.
With that, I think, thank you, Lakshman, Channa, and Dinuka. That's been a fantastic conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much.